The 2018 Venom movie answered the question, can you make Venom a movie without Spider-Man? With the second movie coming out in 2021, the question is, can you make a Venom movie with Spider-Man? What if Spider-Man became Venom? One of the defining characteristics of Venom has always been his obsessive relationship with his first earthly host, Spider-Man. With Venom effectively restarting Sony's Spider-related universe for the third time, they've created a Venom who's never heard of Peter Parker. As the shifting sands of the Marvel and Sony deal, shift, there's room for Spider-Man and Venom to bond and perhaps even become Venom. And it might happen in Venom, There Will Be Carnage. This will make for a different kind of symbiote-Parker relationship, but there's still clues from the canon and the various deals to have an idea of what it might look like. The story of Peter Parker and the symbiote that would become his most obsessive villain is pretty well known. During Secret Wars, when Peter didn't have the time or resources to darn his suit, he went into an alien lab that gave him a suit that seemed to respond to his every command. It was, because it was a symbiote Klyntarian that had been experimented on by the Kree and abandoned by his own kind. Poor Venom. He just wants a friend, to kill people with and eat some brains. When Peter Parker didn't get on with Venom's baser impulses, he went on a bell tower and got rid of the symbiote, who didn't take the breakup very well. Bonding with Eddie Brock, who thought Peter had cost him his job, Venom as we know him in the comics was born. Since then, Venom has had several hosts and different jobs, both as a good guy and a bad guy, or a bad good guy or a good bad guy. But Peter Parker has always been his number one. How can that story inform Peter Parker coming in late to the game for the cinematic Venom and Eddie Brock? Well, I'm glad you asked. Venom There Will Be Carnage is set to feature yet another symbiote, this time Carnage. It might seem redundant since Venom faced off against Riot in the first film, but Carnage isn't just another symbiote. In the comics, Carnage comes about when Brock leaves a little symbiote self behind in a jail cell. It turns out that's how symbiotes reproduce. A part of them just sort of falls off. Ugh. Each new generation tends to be a little stronger and meaner, and Carnage was just more than a chip off the old block. He turns out to be so mean and vicious that even bad guy Venom doesn't like him. This brings us back to Peter Parker's role in the next Spider-Man movie. The symbiote brings out the abilities of the people that host them. It's part of the reason why the Venom symbiote loved taking a ride on Peter Parker. In the Venom movie, Venom tells Brock that they're bonding because they're both kinda losers, but he could want more. We know that Venom There Will Be Carnage points to Sony on that one, that's super fun to say. Venom There Will Be Carnage. Anyway, we know that the new Venom movie will follow Morbius. Morbius the Living Vampire is another character with a complex relationship with Peter Parker. But why that's important is more about two small things tucked away in the trailer. First up is a poster of Spider-Man with the word murderer spray painted on it. The last we left our wall-crawling friend, he was giving MJ a ride on the Web Swing Express when J. Jonah Jameson came on and blamed Spider-Man not only for the crimes of Mysterio, but also with Mysterio's death. Even worse, he outed Peter Parker as Spider-Man. After he spent all that time trying to avoid getting caught for the third time, Ned and MJ had already figured him out. Look, it's a hard secret to keep, alright? The other is appearance of Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, at the end of the trailer. All this points to one question we've had since Venom was announced. Is the Sony Spider-verse part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? The answer, it seems, it's complicated. But what we do know is that Spider-Man in some sort is part of the Venom and Morbius world. And that world definitely has an opinion about Spider-Man that seems to be informed by his time in the MCU. There are two paths here that both end up with a symbiotic Spider-Man. The first is that a down-on-his-luck Peter Parker encounters Eddie Brock. This would be the first time that the symbiote has encountered an enhanced person, and Parker might just be down on his luck enough for that the Venom symbiote to feel like he might have found a new bestie with even more power. The Klyntarians survive off the adrenaline of their hosts, becoming notorious for killing their hosts for the extra boost. Similarly, the movie symbiotes would likely prefer someone with more power. It's even possible that Peter Parker would welcome the symbiote. One of Parker's arcs in the MCU has been his feeling of inadequacy, that he's not good enough or doing enough to live up to his uncle's tacit legacy and the gifts he's been given. It leads him into getting in over his head with the Vulture and trusting Mysterio. When facing a foe as formidable as Carnage, Parker might think he needs all the help he can get, accepting the Venom symbiote only to reject it again because at his core, Peter is a good kid, and the symbiote is at best one friend who always goes way too far. This actually aligns with the origins of Carnage somewhat, in that Spider-Man had to team up with Venom to defeat Carnage. Now the Spider-Verse has a Venom in it that has been spurned by Peter Parker, maybe even getting his ever-present spider symbol on his chest. But there is another option. Movie Brock isn't in prison. He's free and working as an investigative reporter. According to the mid-credits scene in Venom, it's in that capacity that he meets Cletus Cassidy, who is destined to become Carnage. In this scenario, Cletus wouldn't be the first one to come in contact with Venom's little bundle of joy that becomes the Carnage symbiote. Instead, it would be Peter Parker who got a little venom in his peanut butter, separating from him in a similar manner as he did in the comics and causing the symbiote to go mad. Bonding with a human who is made out of the factory, he gives birth to Carnage, and now Venom has to step in and stop him. This solves what is ultimately a minor issue, but where did Carnage get the red and blue color scheme? Does it need that kind of explanation? No, not really. But the symbiotes kind of have a wait for it, symbiotic relationship with Peter Parker, and restoring that relationship will go a long way for the Sony Spider-verse. We know that it's important because we also know that Sony's big plan for their corner of the Marvel Universe is the Sinister Six. The Sinister Six, of course, are the premier Spider-Man hating club, and almost certainly what Toomes is doing in that Morbius trailer. The Vulture is a founding member of the Sinister Six, as well as Scorpion, a fellow inmate with Toomes. Coming from the MCU, Toomes has the requisite special hate for Spider-Man to form a band determined to take down the Wallcrawler. By creating the special love-hate bond with Spider-Man and the symbiotes, it goes a long way in unifying these various Spider-Man-related properties. It also allows them to sit side by side with the MCU, and it's laid a lot of groundwork for the Klyntarians. Remember Nowhere, the floating severed head of a Celestial? In the comics, the head was taken off its body by Knull, the creator of the symbiotes. In fact, he used the head to create them. The cult members that attended Ronan the Accuser and Guardians of the Galaxy? They're Exolon monks, another creation of Knull. That sweet sword that Hela had in Thor Ragnarok? It resembles all black the Necrosword, the first of the symbiotes. All of these elements have been supporting players in the MCU, but for Venom and the symbiotes, that's their history. It's a way to take part in the MCU story and run with it without having to be involved in the grand plans of Kevin Feige. It's that last part that's important, folks. Not so long ago, it seemed like the Sony and Marvel sharing deal was a lot more temporary than we had hoped, with the two industry giants not being able to come to terms with the shared custody of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. It took Tom Holland and a few pints making a personal plea to the company to come together and make a deal. What we know about the deal is that the MCU gets to make a third Spider-Man movie and have Spider-Man guest star in another MCU movie. Since the trailer for the Morbius movie, it appears like that part of the deal is that Sony's Spider properties get to acknowledge Spider-Man and his spider problems. Like that poster that says murderer, or his freshman foe Vulture giving Morbius a hard time. If the nature of the Sony and Marvel deal is limited to those specific appearances, then Sony would also be using that time to smoothly transition Spider-Man into their Spider-verse, which could live parallel to the MCU one. This wouldn't be the first time that Marvel has had some tenuous continuity. Marvel itself once split between Marvel Studios and Marvel Entertainment, the latter of which produced the Marvel TV shows on ABC, Netflix, Freeform, and Hulu. While the shows would make slight nods to the cinematic world, to lesser and greater degrees, the amount they intercepted or even acknowledged the developments was at best convenient. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the show that most interacted with the movies, didn't appear to go through the blip. The Runaways even had their own set of time travel rules. It's possible that Sony could exist in this quasi-canonical way, with just enough relationship to the MCU to be a part of it, but with the freedom to be their own thing. I'm sure we'd all love to see Spider-Man interact with Spider-Man villains. There is a problem with all this, though. It's all a matter of timing and logistics. Venom There Will Be Carnage will be released after Morbius, but before the third Spider-Man movie. It was meant to come out much earlier, but we were all put in a timeout that has reshuffled movie releases. Either way, such a big development in Peter's life would have come after or in concert with whatever happens in the third Spider-Man movie, also set for a June 2021 release, though that might be pushed. The other problem is logistical. There are rumors that of course Tom Holland is in Venom, but with filming primarily done for the film, that still remains more or less a rumor without any indication of exactly how much of the movie Holland is in. A small part can be easy to hide, like the Ancient One having conversations with Bruce Banner, or J.K. Simmons appearing as J. Jonah Jameson at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home. But becoming a symbiote bonded with Spider-Man requires so much more. All this points to Peter Parker's role in Venom There Will Be Carnage being a small one, perhaps in the form of just a cameo or even an end credit scene. In that case, it could be that Spider-Man sits out Carnage showdown altogether, but instead finds himself bound with the symbiote at the end. This could go a long way towards setting up a larger story with the Klyntarians as a part of either the MCU or the Sony Spider-verse. We'll know one way or another when Venom There Will Be Carnage hits theaters June 25th, 2021. That's how Peter Parker could become Venom in the next Venom movie. What role do you want Peter to play in the new movie? Let us know in the comments, and while you're there, why not subscribe to CBR for more of the latest videos in your inbox? Stay safe, and thanks for watching.